What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown. This is Heresy Financial, and shocker, another month, another inflation record broken, and it's bigger than the last inflation records that have been being broken for the last couple of months. And so today we are going to dive into the numbers, look at what's going on, and look at what we might expect going forward, because contrary to what most people are now expecting, I think it's very possible that we see a short period of time where inflation actually cools off for a bit of time. So we're going to dive into that. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, first let's take a look here at inflation. So we see it surged 6.8% in November. That's a year-over-year number, and so that means compared to last November's prices, which of course again was even more than expected, although at this point you have to ask more than who expected, right? Fastest rate since 1982. So let's take a look at this chart. It's fantastic. I love this chart. It's so eye-opening here. All right, so we're going to look at this is the chart of inflation since 1980. We're up here at 6.8% this year. So previously, every single month, 6.2 last month, 5.4, 5.4, 4.2, whatever, all the way back. They were all being eclipsed by this 6.3% from 1990. That was October and November in 1990. Now we've bumped up past that just a tad bit to 6.8%, which means now we don't get an eclipsing of that inflation reading from this month until we get all the way back here towards June of 1982. So all these decades we've now eclipsed. We've got the highest inflation since the time when Volcker was, really trying to get a lid back on inflation. Interest rates had peaked back here in 1980. Prices started to decline. And so we have to go all the way back to here before we start to get to a point where we have inflation higher than we have right now, which means, you're not doing technical analysis on this. This isn't charting or anything, but that's significant that you have to go back all the way to here when, inflation was really out of control, and then, coming back down from that. It means that it's possible we're entering into a period of time of sustained inflation here. Here's the other thing. Take a look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have this timeline of changes that they've made to the CPI. You can see here in 64 they made revisions. In 1978 they made a bunch of revisions. In 1987 they made a bunch of revisions. 1998 they did a bunch of revisions. Some of these revisions were things like the substitution method. So if steak gets too expensive and people start buying chicken instead because it's cheaper, well then in the index they're going to swap in chicken for steak. And it's kind of a sneaky way to keep inflation numbers suppressed, because prices went up. People just swapped out what they were buying because prices went up. So to say that prices haven't gone up as a result of people switching is, I think it's deceptive. One of the other ones is quality adjustment. So they do these things, they call it hedonic adjustment. So if quality increases, then they reduce the amount of price increase. So if the price stays the same, but the quality goes up, then they'll say the price went down, because you're getting more quality, better for the same amount of money. Or if prices go up and quality also went up, they'll say the price stayed the same. And it's, equations for each item here, but you've got some of the stupidest stuff they do hedonic adjustment to, like clothing. I mean, do pants last longer than they did 20 years ago? Probably not, actually. They probably last not as long. It's probably going the other way. So who knows how they're measuring quality for some of these things. And then others, it's just ridiculous here. So if you scroll down, you can see they do hedonic adjustment to refrigerators and freezers, washers and dryers, ranges and cooktops, and microwave ovens. It might just be me, but the fact that we have digital displays and buttons rather than knobs and little tiny quality adjustments like that today, you've got maybe a little internet chip in so you can control it from your app. I don't think that the increase in quality from those slight adjustments over the last couple of decades make up for at all what the purpose of the device actually is and how much those things actually cost. So I think the fact that you have hedonic adjustment on some things like this is just absolutely ridiculous. Refrigerators and freezers still keep your stuff cold just like they always have. You're not saving any money, all things considered, by having your refrigerator have a touch screen on it compared to 10, 20 years ago when it didn't have a touch screen on it. Same thing with washers and dryers, ranges, cooktops, right? Just absolutely ridiculous that things like that have hedonic adjustment that are suppressing the actual cost increase that's taking place. Same thing like phones, accessories, smartwatches. So the fact that your the computing power rises every year, doubles or triples or whatever it is, the chip gets more powerful. They subtract that from the price increase because they're saying you're getting more for the amount of money you're spending. Now there's some element of truth to this, right? It's not all deception, because the fact of the matter is your average cell phone today, in 20 years ago, to get that you'd have to buy a camcorder and a camera and a calculator and a GPS system or atlases every year to update for maps to get around. Just all sorts of random assortment of technology and things that you'd have to buy are all packaged into one device now. So it's not 100% deception that's going on here. There is some element of truth to it. Probably they use it more aggressively than they should. And you can see how some of this works out with Shadow Stats. This is a website he does uses the prior inflation metrics without the adjustments from 1990. Shows that currently inflation is probably around 11% if you're using the 1990 based metrics versus the 6.8 that they came out with. And then consumer inflation using the 1980 based metrics means that it's probably closer to 15%, which pushes it right around to the peak of 1980, which is pretty surprising there, meaning that, and like I said, there is some merit to some of the changes that they've made. Substitution, quality adjustment, some of these things have some merit. So we're probably not, on average, at the peak where we were at in 1980, but we're probably a lot higher than 6.8. So we're not comparing apples to apples here. So the fact that we have to go back to 1982 when we're using the new metrics with all the adjustments to keep inflation, the measurement lower, the fact that we're already breaking into these records with the current adjustments means that if we were comparing apples to apples, and more accurately than something like this would show, we'd probably be a lot closer to the peak in 1980. All right, here's the other thing I want to show you from Lynn Alden. She posted this. This is the current CPI versus short-term interest rates. This is the biggest gap over short-term interest rates since the 1940s. So this spread here, normally when inflation starts picking up, short-term interest rates pick up along with it. They tend to correlate a little bit tighter, but they've been held down. Inflation has been taking off, which means that raising rates by 0.25%, 0.5% next year, while it might tank the economy, is not going to do anything to this inflation here. This was the other one that she posted, which is going to get to the meat, which I said we might experience some more muted inflation over the coming months here, and I'll explain why in the next couple of pictures as well. We're looking at month-over-month inflation here. So month-over-month inflation is just the current prices based compared to the previous month rather than the previous year. So 0.8%, which is slightly lower than last month, which was 0.9%. So you might be asking, well, why? Here's the thing that's important to know about inflation. It lags monetary policy by a long time, a year or more. By the time that the impact from monetary and fiscal policy hit the numbers, it's been a long time. There's a huge lag time. So we're seeing a big spike in prices over the last couple of months. Massive spike, right? Where was the last time we saw a massive spike in monetary and fiscal policy? Well, let's look at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet here. Early 2020, massive spike in their balance sheet. They bought a lot of government debt. massive spike in over the same period of time in early 2020 here in the M2 money supply. The total supply of money in circulation, broad money supply, spiked over the same period of time, early 2020. Why did the Federal Reserve have to buy a bunch of debt? Well, because the Federal Reserve spent a lot of money into the economy. That's where this money supply increase came from. The federal government spent a lot of money into the economy, way more than they brought in taxes. So we had a deficit of over $3 trillion. The federal government spent $3 trillion more than it brought in from taxes. That was spending money into existence, financed by the Federal Reserve's purchasing of debt. And so when did this all happen? Early 2020. And we are just now, over the last couple of months, seeing the spike in prices as a result of the spike in the balance sheet, the spike in money supply growth, the spike in deficit spending. And now that deficit spending over 2021 was reduced a little bit, not a lot. Money supply has continued to go up, though not nearly at the same pace as that initial spike. I'll zoom out here so you can see more clearly here. That spike was far more aggressive than this growth has been. Federal Reserve's balance sheet has continued to grow, but again, not as severe as that initial spike. And so once we see that spike in money finish working its way through the economy, we're going to see a finishing of this spike in prices temporarily, and we'll probably see the inflation number come back down to 3, 4, maybe 5%. We're going to see a drop in inflation numbers, and everybody's going to start running victory laps. We're going to see politicians running victory laps saying, hey, we got a lid on inflation. Inflation's coming back down. We're going to see Federal Reserve officials say, hey, the taper's working. Inflation is coming back down. That's not what's happening. All that's happening is the spike stopped. The spike has already worked its way through. And so we're still continuing to see the expansion of the money supply financed by the Federal Reserve's purchasing of government debt that is spending money into existence. It's just at a slower pace than this recent spike. And so once that spike has finished hitting prices, then we're probably going to see inflation numbers come back down 3, 4, 5%. And they're going to start running victory laps, not realizing that the taper, the tightening, it's going to cause a big crisis. They're going to have to reverse course, print a bunch of money. The $3 trillion deficit that we're seeing here is going to look like child's play. They're going to have to do a 4, 5, 6, $7 trillion deficit in 2022, 2023, whenever things start to unwind. And then things will really get out of control from there. We're going to probably see a temporary reprieve in prices going up. This 6, 7%, these numbers are probably not going to be sustained during the beginning of 2022. Beginning of 2022, we're going to see these numbers come back down before they really start shooting up, and we start seeing 70s inflation numbers all over again, just astronomically high, especially considering the measurement has been changed. So when we start to see inflation, real official inflation numbers hitting 10, 20, 15 even percent, we have to recognize that is much higher than what was going on in the 70s because the metric has been adjusted to be more conservative, not show as much inflation as it used to. Anyway, hope this was helpful. I really appreciate you guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day.